So, reactivity or responsiveness, the difference and the journey. A lot of people will talk about reactivity and responsiveness, so I thought I'd add to the conversation. First thing to say is that if you want to end your own reactivity and somehow navigate towards more responsiveness, you're going to have to go on a journey within yourself and meet your darkness, ultimately meet your unconsciousness. It's a journey. There's nothing that can be done about that. It's a very personal, intimate journey within ourselves. And there's no fast track to that, as far as I can see. It's an organic undoing of that which has tied us up and created this reactivity. It's a journey into conscious presence in all circumstances. And that can only be a journey because we don't know what those circumstances are going to be. But reactivity or responsiveness. Reactivity is the absence of presence. It's a reaction that rises up from within us, that hijacks all ideas of presence, all ideas of our equanimity, and rises up as though an entity itself has suddenly taken over the host and has entered the battle zone, ready to flee or ready to fight. It's an attack or defend mechanism that lives deep inside us, in our subtle and not so subtle energy body, in our nervous system, in the body armouring, in the armouring around the heart, in the walls we've erected, in the conditioning we've adopted. Reactivity is ultimately a survival mechanism that's gotten out of hand. It has, to a certain extent, some of its roots in survivalism, in the sense that it's a primitive limbic way, and I'm not a scientist or even a biologist, whatever that might be, so I can't speak to this in that way, but I can see that it's got an ancestral quality to it, born of, yes, survivalism. You know, when the tiger is charging towards you, you react. And so it is when the truck is hurtling towards us or something. You know, in many ways, if somebody's trying to come towards us to attack us, we react. And that reactivity is the basis of some of our survival. So, you know, there's an inherently, survivalist, which is useful quality to reactivity. But, and here we go, it doesn't kind of stop there, because it's almost as though the self has risen up and has somehow kind of adopted that primal survival reactive mechanism, and then uses it in some way unconsciously in circumstances where the self, the imagined self, the created self, the conditioned self, feeling emotionally, existentially, mentally, energetically under threat in some kind of way, reacts like that, like a flash of lightning. Does it react? Without thought, without presence. In circumstances, what I'm trying to say is, in circumstances where it's not relevant, in circumstances where it's destructive and not survivalist in the way that we might need it. So it becomes, a destructive force that hurts us and hurts others. When I learned that the prisons, were full to some capacity of people, men and women, who've acted in a moment of reactivity, in the flash of lightning, not premeditated, not thought through, lost in a reactive flash of the moment, and a catastrophe has happened, a catastrophe of violence or abuse or murder. It was a shock. And I see that reactivity is not just in those people in prison who've been incarcerated, but it's in all of us who have been conditioned into the unconscious ways where wounds, traumas, grievances, hurts have buried themselves inside and have no way out, no way to express. They can't be felt because they're too painful. So they live, under the iceberg, as it were. And we, in our way, good or bad, walk the world somehow almost unconsciously imagining that that's not there, that iceberg is not there, and it's there. And then when a trigger comes along, somebody says something, somebody does something. It could be in the road, it could be the road rage, it could be somebody in the store, it could be a loved one, it could be a family, it could be your own thought, really. Your own sense of failure or unworthiness where you didn't get it right, or you didn't do something properly, but usually it comes triggered by another, says something, does something, and the flash arrives, and this iceberg energy rises up. Whew. There it is. And afterwards, there can be a great remorse afterwards, there can be a great guilt, because in many ways, that flash of reactivity, it might not even last long. If one's, in relationship, if one person's, reactivity to something that is said is then met by the other's reactivity, because they don't, they've been triggered by what has been said, but by the reactivity itself, then you enter the loop, the loop of chain reaction, the endless looping in relationship of reactivity. That it's like until something bursts in some kind of way, either through some terrible action, or through one of the people, one of the actors, one of the players, one of the people in relationship says, no, let's stop. No. As if I surrender. Surrender and reactivity, even though they might sound like they don't live together, they really do. Because if we can surrender the one who is reactive, endlessly reacting, then we're onto something really good. But as I said at the beginning of this, to end reactivity is a deep journey within, and it's going to involve some meeting with our past selves, with our past wounds, with our grievances, with our hurts. You can't end reactivity without surrender. Surrender of the self again and again and again. And you can't surrender the self again and again and again without kindness, without tenderness, and without going to a deeper love. A love that borders not on neediness or transaction, but on unconditionality. This is the journey. Yes, in some ways we may need to enter the body armouring. We may need to enter the body system, the body holding system, and release whatever tensions, whatever energies are being held onto. Come on, Peyote. Are being held onto, and that's a journey. That's a cathartic journey. That's a bodywork journey. Yeah, that's a rebirth, cathartic, primal release journey that is very, very useful. There's psychosynthesis, there's body parts work, there's all of this bringing to light, that which lives inside us dormant until the trigger comes. And make no mistake, it's there. There's nobody in the Western world that I've met yet where it doesn't live in them. So it's a journey to uncover that. And a scary, beautiful journey. But by and by, the reactivity, that gets us in all sorts of bother with ourselves and with others, starts to decrease by and by. A melting happens. A melting happens. This is what I mean about some of the gradual path. This is part of the gradual path. And then as we become kind of more and more abiding in presence, in the depth of us, in the depth of the body system, if you like. Not in the body system, but it feels as though it's in the body system because body, emotion, mind, spirit become one thing that they are anyway, but fractured and fragmented in reactivity and holding on to the unconscious patterns. But by and by, from the more deeply abiding place, responsiveness starts to happen. Responsiveness is right action that arises from the depth of our equanimity. Responsiveness is right action that comes from intuition, that comes from depth, that actually comes from a certain grace. Responsiveness is a movement of harmony. It's not grandiose. It's not denial of reactivity, but it's the capacity to stay as if centered, the capacity to stay as if silent in the midst of the storm, to stay just here, quietly. The storm rages, action might need to be taken. Responsiveness is that action. You see how it arises from such a different place, and it's not a place that's perfect or fixed. It can't be. You're found through bypassing reactivity. It can only be found through the end of reactivity. And that's really the journey. Responsiveness in many ways arises as if by itself when reactivity is dissolved. When reactivity is as if dissolved into the union of us. It's a deep journey. On a personal note, yes, of course, I've been reactive all my life, like everybody else. Reactivity doesn't always necessarily, have an action in it, but it certainly, has a judgment in it. Secret judgment or a judgment foisted upon the world. It's the end of union. It says, I'm separate. Reactivity is separation, writ large. Reactivity easily becomes the declaration of war, and war itself, war between individuals, war between the self and other, war between nations, tribes, etc., etc. And I know that I've waged many a war. And then as the cliff of reactivity, the reactive self, eroded more and more and more over this exquisite and crazy life. So that when reactivity, were to happen, and the less it happens, when it does happen, it's worse. It's worse because the pain of leaving one's union is greater when one realizes how much suffering that moving away causes, both to the individual, and to the world being other. And so it became more and more painful, and as it becomes more and more painful, so there's not an urgency, but a greater and deeper devotion to saying, what am I going to do really about this reactivity in me? Because it's too painful. And even though there's only remnants of it left, those remnants are just too painful to bear. I can't bear them anymore. So what to do? And we're left with that situation. That's what I was faced with. And I had to take a deeper and deeper sense of responsibility in a good way to myself, to my depth, to my truth, to my soul, to my heart, to my spirit, to the world, to everything that was authentic in me. To say, I'm going to have to surrender all of that over and over and over again and again and again. And to have the capacity, even when reactivity rises up, to choose the death of the self that wants to survive. And that's the space between reactivity and realizing you've become reactive grows shorter and shorter and shorter, less and less and less time, until it's quick. I had a moment, like, I don't know, 5 years ago or something, where I was with Amoda, my wife. It was a small thing. Well, I got triggered in the kitchen in some sort of way. I can't even remember what it was. It was so small and innocuous. Seems ridiculous now. But I decided this was just intolerable. No, I said, no. And then, by surprise, the reactivity kind of rose up in me, and that no became a force, a fire, a matter of life and death in the kitchen over nothing. Oh, jeez. And then because of the work, there is work to be done on the spiritual path. My God, there's work to be done. But I've got a sincerity, an authenticity about me, and I was like, I had a moment where I saw very quickly, what I was doing, which was not really being reasonable or true or honest or caring or kind or present, that I've flipped into this reactivity. And I thought, well, what would happen if I just let this go in this moment? And I realized, subconsciously or somewhere, I'd think, well, I'm going to lose. I'm going to lose the fight. And I'll be humiliated. Self will be humiliated. Oh God, sorry. The self will be humiliated, just like that. And like falling over on camera. And I stood there in that moment and I laughed. I just found myself suddenly laughing at my insanity and the ludicrousness of seeing, what game I was playing and how that game was absurd. Absurd. Ridiculous. And so I laughed and I said, sorry. Sorry is a great word when it comes from a deep place. Sorry is a fantastic word to the other, to a partner. Sorry. You can't have a true sorry and hold up the indignant, reactive self at the same time. It doesn't work. If sorry is a glib, peacemaking attempt to cover over, or, all of those kind of tactics, it has no meaning, has no bearing. That's not what's being talked about here. But sorry that comes from a deep place. I'm sorry. Sorry to myself, primarily. And I'm sorry to the other. Something got hold of me and I was lost for a moment. And there's such great humility in that I laughed. And the whole thing dissolved. The whole argument, the whole energy of that friction that wants to build itself into a nuclear war just ended in peace, quickly. I was like, this is ridiculous. And it hasn't really come back since then. It's been challenged. The challenge of the world doesn't go away. You can try and get to the cave in the Himalayas hoping to, oh, come on. Come here. There you go, come here.
Come on, Stella.
Go on.
Come on, Stella. You're good.
Go on, Stella.
Thank you.
Okay. Come on. Where are we? Oops. You can try and get rid of your reactivity by going to hide in a cave in the Himalayas and meditating your way through life. You know, but really that's not the calling here. That's not the calling for modern man or woman. It's just not. So there has to be a way. We have to find a way. You can't run from your reactivity. You can't really find much of a cushion. Ultimately, you know, ultimately, if reactivity is in you, and it's in some more than others, of course, because of conditioning, because of ancestry, because of trauma, because of wounding, then, you know, it's in some people more than others. Even if it's in you, you can run from it, you can try and meditate it away and whatever, but ultimately it won't go. So you have to deal with it. And the work in the modern world, for the modern mystic, you know, for the modern seeker, is to deal with it. And there's a great blessing in dealing with it, because you become more present, more loving, more kind, more compassionate, more graceful, more here, more willing to be the eye at the centre of the storm. And there are many storms, many storms, and storms are on the inside. They're in relationship, they're in the survivalism that's within this world at the moment, and of course they're in the political landscape and the whole of the toxic landscape that we exist in, you know. And so, you know, to get sucked into the reactivity is to lose yourself. No one really wants to lose themselves. There are other people who want you to lose yourself, but you don't want to lose yourself. And the only way to really find yourself and to know yourself is to deal with your inner reactivity. Thank you for listening. Please, if you like these videos, subscribe, give me a thumbs up, throw me a comment, and I'm very interactive on YouTube. I love to speak with people. I do sessions, I do all sorts of things. You know, if you want to interact with me, please do. But do like and subscribe and share and comment with these videos if you like them. Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye.